many days I tracked the beast before arriving at the outskirts of Edgewood, a sleepy little town on the borderlands of the Kingdom of Devure. It was there that I saw the tracks of the wolf merge into that of a man. The tracks led a few hundred yards to the gates of Edgewood, where I believe the beast was allowed entry into the town proper. And now, it could be anyone. For I fear the beast will not reveal itself until the next full moon, and when it does, I will be there to vanquish the beast. For my name is Damon Davil, and I am the Monster Slayer. In this episode of EpicSolo, we're going to discuss the Monster Slayer, a new custom class I've designed for use with Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy. Now, before you start throwing vials of holy water all over the comments section, allow me a chance to explain my perspective on custom classes. Now, does Old School Essentials, or any classic fantasy RPG for that matter, really need another custom class? And the answer is no, it doesn't. But also, yes, because why not? The spirit of homebrew is something that has been a part of classic fantasy role-playing games since their inception. If not for new custom classes, we would still be adventuring with the three original classes: the cleric, the fighting man, and the magic user. And so we have the spirit of homebrewing content to thank for classic classes such as the paladin or even the thief. And so without pushing the envelope on class design, the shared construct of our fantasy landscape would be a lot less interesting. Now, the biggest challenge in designing custom content, and especially player character classes for classic fantasy role-playing games, and where I see a lot of custom classes that miss the mark, is that the classes become overpowered or have abilities that don't fit neatly into the extremely well-crafted design principles of these games. So what I attempt to do in designing custom classes for these games is to stay within the framework of the design principles so that we achieve a class that is not only thematic, balanced, and fun to play, but also something that feels like it could have been a part of the original game or a supplement release around that time without being distracting and or feeling out of place. And I feel like we were able to do that with the custom sorcerer class, and I've received a lot of great feedback from players that have really enjoyed it as an addition to their games. And so, it is that I present to you, much like Dr. Frankenstein, my latest creation, the Monster Slayer. So by the time you are watching this video, the custom class will be available on DriveThruRPG for a modest $1. That's all I'm asking. I don't have Patreon or subscriptions, and so if you want to help support the channel and get a really exciting and thematic new class to use in your games, head on over to DriveThruRPG and pick it up. We're just going to go right through the PDF, the same PDF that you'd be downloading from DriveThruRPG. We'll talk about the class, how it was designed, and hopefully pique your interest. Hopefully it's something that you'd be interested in adding to your games. The Monster Slayer, a custom class. This is the first edition. Now, that's not to say I haven't been thinking about this class and designing it and redesigning it and testing it, but this is our first published edition. Now, if there's an update or a second edition, you will receive access to that. You can download it as soon as anything is updated. I want to thank Diego Castro. We're featuring beautiful black and white illustrations, playtesting. These are the amazing friends that I have had the pleasure of gaming with, some of them for many years, and thanks to them and their honest and critical feedback, we've got something that can hit your table that isn't going to be completely broken. So thanks to them, and thanks to you, you are one of those people too. So what is a Monster Slayer? Monster Slayers dedicate their lives to hunting and slaying monsters. They are skilled warriors that specialize in lore and tactics, effective in defeating their chosen enemies. Now, that chosen enemy is very much at the core of this class and will be a theme that a lot of the mechanics utilize. This definition of a Monster Slayer is intentionally broad, allowing the players and referee to determine the origin and nature of the Monster Slayer. Perhaps the Monster Slayer is a vampire hunter, seeking vengeance for their slain loved ones, or perhaps they seek the fortune, glory, and title of the Dragon Slayer. Regardless, the Monster Slayer has dedicated their life to hunting and vanquishing their chosen enemies. And so here you have it on one page, everything you need to play the Monster Slayer. So before we go through the class, something to make note of here. Our tables play Old School Essentials Advanced Fantasy. And why that's important is because we're playing with separate race and class and a lot of optional rules. Pretty much if there's an optional rule, we're using it. For example, attacking with 2 weapons, missile attacks on targets in melee, parrying, subduing, weapon proficiency. We also utilize fighter combat talents and D6 thief skills from Carcass Crawler Issue 1. So if you don't know what Carcass Crawler is, it is the zine from Necrotic Gnome for Old School Essentials. There are 3 of them, and there's going to be a 4th released in December. Now they give you all sorts of other cool options for the game. Some of them we use and some of them we don't, and that's part of the fun. One of the reasons why I love Old School Essentials is that I'm very easily able to slipstream stuff from AD&D 1st edition or 2nd edition right into the game. And so why is that important? One of the reasons it's important is because of the fighter class. When you start using things like weapon proficiencies and fighter combat talents, the fighter class really takes on a little bit more of a unique flavor. Adding optional rules and some other options for the fighter class allows for the other existing martial classes to shine, also affords us the opportunity to get creative with some new custom classes. So here it is, everything you need to play the Monster Slayer on one page. Requirements: minimum constitution of 9 and minimum dexterity of 9. If you're going to be a Monster Slayer, you better have a high constitution, both literally and figuratively. They are very much a dexterity-based fighter. You'll see why in a minute. Prime requisite, therefore, is dexterity. Hit die, 1d8, maximum level 14, armor, leather, chainmail, but no shields. Weapons: one-handed melee weapons and the crossbow. Languages: alignment common and chosen enemy. So what is the chosen enemy? Now the chosen enemy is very much at the core of the class design for the Monster Slayer. And yes, there's absolutely some influence from AD&D 2nd edition. At first level, Monster Slayers choose a type of monster to be their chosen enemy. An example would be undead or lycanthrope. At the referee's discretion, they receive a +1 bonus to armor class saving throws, attack, and damage rolls against that enemy. This increases to +2 at 6th level and +3 at 11th level. Upon reaching 6th level, they may choose a second chosen enemy. They're going to receive a +2 bonus to all of those things, and that bonus is going to increase to +3 at 11th level. Upon reaching 11th level, they may choose a third and final chosen enemy. They're going to receive a +3 bonus to armor class saving throws, attack, and damage rolls against that enemy. So the core theme of the Monster Slayer is that they have chosen enemies. They have monsters that they have sworn to vanquish, and that they spend their career learning lore and tactics so that they can hunt and defeat their chosen enemy. And so that theme will be explored and utilized in the class abilities of the Monster Slayer. So one of the goals in designing this class is not only to support the theme with different mechanics and class abilities, but also to not step on the toes of the fighter class and the other martial classes. And so there's a balance between choosing things that are thematic, but also not just simply making the Monster Slayer a redundant version of the fighter. And you'll see that in some of the choices in combat. Monster Slayers can use one-handed melee weapons, crossbows, leather armor, chainmail, and cannot use shields. Monster Slayers of 3rd level wearing light armor can attack with 2 weapons, suffering no penalty with their primary weapon, and a -2 penalty with their secondary weapon. So a little bit to unpack here. The first thing, the use of one-handed melee weapons. That's a design choice that represents that they're a dexterity-based fighter. Chosen ranged weapon is crossbow because it's super thematic. As far as armor, again, their fighting style is based on agility, and so they're limited to leather armor, chainmail, and they cannot use shields. So the design choices for combat are as much to support the theme as they are to maintain balance. And what I mean by that is if we gave the Monster Slayer access to all the same weapons and armor that a fighter would have, well, now it's just a fighter with a bunch of bonus class abilities. And so you have to take a few things away if you're going to give a few things to the class, right? And being able to do that in a way that supports the theme, making the class viable without being overpowered, that, my friends, might be the secret sauce in creating these custom classes for these classic fantasy role-playing games. So the bit about the two-weapon fighting, then, that's definitely a nod to subsequent versions of the game. And I think it's done in a way that fits in really nicely in a BX framework. It's not too overpowered. It does give us a incentive to dual wield, and some of you might not be aware that's a thing. Two-weapon fighting is a thing, whether you're getting a penalty or a bonus or not. It's in the game. And so this gives us some incentive for this dexterity-based fighter that can't use a shield to yield that secondary weapon. All right, here's the scene. You have the monster slayer, and he has brimmed hat. He's wearing leather armor. He's got a long coat. It conceals his primary weapon, maybe a sword. His secondary weapon is a dagger made of silver. He doesn't need a shield because he is a very agile fighter. He ducks and he dodges and he weaves, and it's freaking awesome. Anyway, something like that. You get the idea. So the next few class abilities are very inspired by the Ranger. And in many ways, the Monster Slayer is a variant on the Ranger class. However, highly specialized to their chosen enemy, as you will see. Enemy awareness. Monster Slayers are only surprised by their chosen enemy on a roll of 1. This may mean that a Monster Slayer is able to act in the surprise round while their companions are surprised. Enemy pursuit. When the Monster Slayer's party pursues a chosen enemy in the wilderness, the chance of evasion is reduced by 10%. Enemy tracking. Monster Slayers are proficient at tracking their chosen enemy. This skill improves as the character gains levels. Success may be modified by the following factors. And so here you're going to see 3 class abilities very much inspired by the Ranger, however heavily specialized, and they're only going to be effective against their chosen enemy. Enemy weakness. Monster Slayers are adept at exploiting their chosen enemy's weaknesses. They're able to hit monsters that can normally only be harmed by certain damage. So for some players and referees, this one might seem a little out there. If they prefer questing to find a certain weapon that can do damage to a monster, I completely understand. I do think it's a great class ability. It's thematic. The idea is that the Monster Slayer would be well versed in the lore and finding weapons that can harm their chosen enemy. And it's really limited to their chosen enemy. It's not that crazy. In fact, it reminds me of another class ability. So, it ain't too crazy. You got 4th level barbarians out there striking invulnerable monsters. And so, again, as with all things Monster Slayer, very isolated, very specialized to their chosen enemy. All right, here we go. Pitchforks and torches. After reaching 11th level, a Monster Slayer may establish a posse. 2d6 first level Monster Slayers will join the Monster Slayer. However, should any of them be killed, the PCs will not be able to attract new posse members to replace them. So this is very much the angry mob of villagers going to storm the castle with their pitchforks and their torches. I love this idea that you got a Monster Slayer who's establishing a posse to go vanquish that chosen enemy. Let's take a look at the Monster Slayer level progression chart. Now, this is a martial class level progression chart. This is the exact same progression chart as the fighter. So for your XP threshold, your hit die, your THAC0 to hit, and saving throws, it's exactly the same, right down to the XP threshold. Now, with a custom class, I might make that a little bit higher. However, I think we're at the right spot because I feel like there might be a high mortality rate for the trait of monster slaying. And so I think it's right in there. Seems good. So let's take a look at some stats. We'll take a look at the tail of the tape here just so you know this custom class design isn't all just insanity and coffee, right? There's actually some math and playtesting that goes into it. And what I wanted to do is just a base comparison of the Monster Slayer and the fighter versus chosen enemy and any other enemy. Now, it's assumed that both of these characters have ability scores of 10 across the board for the comparison, and we start to see some interesting things. The advantages are going to be in the green text, and the disadvantage is going to be in the armor class. And the trend that you see is that Monster Slayers are just not going to have the same armor class, the same defensive ability as the fighter. So your fighter class is still your true tank. Those martial classes that have access to full plate and shields, they're still going to be at the front of the line. However, as you start to look down, And once you get to 11th level, let's really focus in now. That Monster Slayer has survived quite a few encounters at that point. But you see for the first time that armor class is on par with the fighter, even with their full plate and shield at 17. So they're getting that mighty +3 bonus to their armor class, their attack, their damage, and their saving throws. Super cool, super thematic. Now this is a lifelong Monster Slayer, their entire career, that by 11th level, they have become quite proficient in vanquishing their chosen enemy. And so a comparison just to make sure that we're keeping things balanced, but also that the niche specialized class is really cool at doing what it's supposed to do. So something to consider here is that I usually wouldn't have my Monster Slayer wearing chainmail. I did this for the comparison because I wanted to see what the highest armor class available to them would look like as far as the numbers. The reason why is they're not going to get access to that class ability for combat for attacking with 2 weapons. They're only going to be able to benefit from that when they're wearing light armor. And so why that's important is because it's a really great incentive to get in there with that light armor. So they're even more squishy, but they are going to be able to attack twice per round with that -2 penalty to their secondary weapon. And so you've got this Monster Slayer in there that can really be a problem. They can do some damage, but they're a little squishy, especially when they're not fighting their chosen enemy. So there you have it, the Monster Slayer, a custom class designed for use with old school essentials, advanced fantasy. Here's the deal. I do these custom class videos. I kind of feel like a used car salesman, like I'm trying to sell you this class, but the reality is I don't give a rat's ass what you think, because I know that this class is awesome, and I'll tell you why. Because not all classes make it to this phase. There's many classes, there's many ideas in the recycle bin right now. And so if it makes it this far, it's got something to it. And so I hope it sees some play on your tables. It's definitely going to see some play on our tables. And I hope it's something that you can use in your games, whether it's a player character or an NPC. It's a very specialized class. It certainly isn't overpowered, and that might be the knock on it. Might not be all that strong, right? It's a martial class that's highly specialized, vanquishing their chosen enemy. But in the right adventure, in the right scenario, with the right party, it could be a whole lot of fun. So head on over to DriveThruRPG and you can download the Monster Slayer for $1. That's all I'm asking, man. You got $1? Feel like you're lying, man. So I don't do Patreon or ask for subscriptions, but I do make some cool content for the game that we all enjoy. And you can really help support the channel by downloading a Monster Slayer. And I do have some other modules, things I am working on, and I will release them this year. I promise. I've got one traditional module that I'm working on and another solo module that I think is going to be a lot of fun for somebody to just roll up a character and get lost in Orange Sphere and maybe run into some familiar faces. So we'll see how that goes. So thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the program, and we will see you soon.
Lothar, are you listening, Lothar?
Yeah, I am listening. I was just thinking about the Varisian Chronicles and the tales of my grandfathers who were kings.
And you will know that it is I alone who can tell thee of this saga.
Yeah, that's not the problem.
Then what is the problem, Lothar?
Well, you stopped telling the story. You were telling the story and then you stopped.
Yes, there is a reason for this, Lothar.
Yeah, well, what is the reason?
Have you ever walked with a woman, Lothar?
Of course I have walked with a woman. I have walked with many women.
Then you will know that But you must be careful to choose whom you walk with, lest they lead you down a path of treachery and deceit.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer my questions.
Silence! It answers all of your questions.